is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis.
Keir Starmer is under intense scrutiny, dealing with rising discontent within his own party and a wave of public frustration. His inconsistent stances on key issues such as Brexit and immigration have left many puzzled, as migrant numbers continue to climb despite his vows to crack down on smugglers. Labour's recent defeats at the polls are only fueling the perception that he's lost direction. With calls for his resignation becoming increasingly vocal, one has to ask, how much longer can Starmer stay afloat before everything unravels?
Yes, I mean, it's very hard to summon up any care for which of the sort of creations that have been offered to the Labour parties.
Keir Starmer has been walking a tightrope, attempting to satisfy the various factions within the Labour Party. But it's becoming evident that he may be trying to cater to everyone while ultimately satisfying no one. When Starmer stepped into his role as Labour leader, there were high hopes from all corners. The party's traditional supporters wanted a leader who could bring back core Labour values, harking back to the party's roots. Meanwhile, the younger, more progressive members were looking for someone who would embrace a daring new direction to tackle contemporary social and economic challenges head-on.
Want to improve relations with the EU. We think we can get a better deal than the botched deal that Boris Johnson brought home, and we will work on that, understanding the work that needs to be done and the nature of the challenge. But yes, we do want to improve that relationship.
Yet, Starmer seems caught in an awkward middle ground, constantly pivoting to appeal to both camps, leaving many puzzled. His handling of Brexit has been a prime example. Initially a Remain supporter, he later advocated for a second referendum, and now he's landed somewhere uncertain. To many, it looks like he's attempting to avoid causing a stir, but in doing so, he's only managed to create more confusion. His Brexit stance has become so convoluted that it's unclear where he truly stands. For those seeking a decisive leader with a clear path forward, it feels like he's missed the mark on one of the most critical issues of our time.
Prisons, Rwanda was a very important part of this press conference. The Prime Minister was asked by a British journalist about the Rwanda scheme. That is the scheme about processing and sending back people who have come here illegally.
Immigration has also proven to be a stumbling block. Traditionally, Labour has supported immigration, but with mounting concerns over border control, Starmer has struggled to find a balance. Rather than taking a definitive position, he has tried to straddle the line between welcoming refugees and addressing illegal immigration. After scrapping the contentious Rwanda plan, he promised a fresh approach to tackle people smuggling. But weeks have passed and no substantial actions have been taken. Migrant numbers continue to rise, and critics are quick to highlight that his vague assurances have done little to resolve the situation. It's as if he's trying to juggle both sides of the debate, but the pieces keep slipping from his grasp. Starmer's efforts to bridge the divides within his party are backfiring, eroding public confidence as he struggles to satisfy anyone. His continual flip-flopping has left people disillusioned, with supporters feeling let down and those undecided now looking elsewhere. It's as if every step he takes to win one side alienates even more people on the other. In trying to be all things to all people, Starmer risks becoming irrelevant to everyone.
I don't want them to live here. I don't want them here. They came under false pretenses. Many of them came illegally and continue to come illegally, and we don't want them here. And I'm perfectly willing to say that because it needs to be said.
Douglas Murray has not held back in criticising Starmer's decision to scrap the Rwanda immigration policy. You likely recall the controversial plan, where illegal migrants would be sent to Rwanda for asylum processing rather than staying in the UK. While contentious, the Conservatives saw it as a crucial measure to deter illegal immigration. Murray views Starmer's cancellation of the plan as a disastrous move that has only worsened the situation.
But having said that, 9 boats have made it across so far today, with more than 450 migrants on board taken to that processing.
Since Labour took power and immediately scrapped the Rwanda deal, the figures have been alarming. Just the other day, around 450 migrants crossed the channel in 9 boats, and this has become a weekly occurrence. For the year, more than 19,000 people have crossed illegally since Labour took office, thousands more than before. With numbers climbing and a seeming lack of preparation, the public is taking notice, and the sense of chaos is hard to ignore. The backlash has been swift and intense. People are watching this steady influx and wondering if there's any real plan in place. Murray argues that by discarding the Rwanda policy without a clear alternative, Starmer has demonstrated a serious lapse in leadership. It's as if he tossed the policy aside without considering what would replace it, and the result is evident. Border force vessels are overwhelmed, migrant numbers are soaring, and promises to dismantle smuggling networks remain unfulfilled. Over 6 weeks in, and no one has even been appointed to head the so-called Border Security Command, leaving Starmer's team scrambling to find solutions.
And I have described what has happened to my country of birth, Great Britain, and the continent of Europe, and indeed the wider developed world, and the challenges that come through illegal and legal mass migration. That's not all migration, but illegal and legal mass migration.
Murray doesn't mince words, and he's made it clear this isn't just a minor slip-up. He points to Starmer's inability to control illegal immigration as a major issue, highlighting that it's not merely a question of numbers, but of public trust. People are growing concerned that the government can't secure the borders, fueling widespread frustration. While Starmer may have hoped to differentiate himself from the Conservatives by abandoning the Rwanda policy, he's now dealing with a crisis that feels increasingly out of control. What's more, this concern isn't limited to the hardliners. Across the board, there's growing unease. Labour supporters who believed they were voting for a decisive, capable leader are now questioning if Starmer has the resolve to make difficult choices. The whole situation leaves many wondering whether Starmer truly grasps the magnitude of the problem, or if he's merely sidestepping any policies that might seem too severe. Douglas Murray has been raising concerns about what he perceives as a two-tiered approach to policing in the UK, and he isn't pulling any punches. He claims that the police are selectively enforcing the law, showing favouritism towards certain groups while taking a tougher stance on others. For Murray, this isn't a minor issue. He believes it's undermining public confidence in law enforcement. It's easy to see why this might unsettle people. If the police are perceived as biased, it doesn't just hurt their credibility. It challenges the entire notion of equal justice. Murray argues that political correctness has infiltrated police practices, often making officers more concerned with not offending than with upholding the law. Recent protests offer a clear example, he says. When some groups take to the streets and things get out of hand, the police response can be oddly restrained. Yet when other groups, those not aligned with politically correct narratives, protest in similar ways, the police are quick to clamp down. It feels like there's an unspoken rule about which demonstrations are acceptable and which aren't, a precarious path to tread.
Since January the 1st, it's only been a few days that there has been weather that's just about passable for these boats to come. Today, much better. That's why we're getting high numbers again today.
The media's influence is also a factor, according to Murray. He suggests that police decisions are heavily influenced by how they'll be portrayed in the press. Worried about being seen as overly harsh or biased, they often handle certain groups with kid gloves. But that caution seems to evaporate when dealing with different protesters. It's as though avoiding negative press has become a higher priority than consistent law enforcement. And when the media steps in, they often reinforce this uneven approach with how they frame these incidents. For Douglas Murray, this is more than a fairness issue. It's a worrisome pattern that could lead to serious consequences. If people lose faith in the police's impartiality, they might take matters into their own hands. This could deepen divisions within communities, with each side feeling the system is working against them. Murray insists that the police must push back against these influences and apply the law consistently, no matter who is involved. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's leadership style is stirring up significant unrest within his own party. By centralising power and making decisions without wider input, he's leaving some MPs feeling entirely sidelined. There's a growing sentiment that if you don't align with Starmer's vision, your voice won't be heard. For a party that's supposed to champion diverse perspectives and democratic principles, this top-down approach is causing a lot of frustration.
But actually trying to tackle the people smuggling gangs on the other side of the channel is much more difficult. The National Crime Agency is working ever more closely with their French colleagues, but it's a lucrative business.
Critics within Labour accuse Starmer of disregarding anyone who doesn't fit his agenda. The party, once a forum for open debate and differing viewpoints, now feels stifled under his leadership. MPs who raise concerns or suggest alternative ideas find themselves left out of key discussions. This my way or the highway attitude isn't sitting well with many, and it's beginning to feel like dissenting voices are being systematically silenced. This growing discontent is particularly strong among those who feel their views reflect what Labour should stand for. What started as quiet grumbling has escalated into open calls for Starmer to step aside. There's talk of the need for fresh leadership, someone who can bring the party together instead of fracturing it. Some MPs even say they barely recognise their own party anymore, a serious red flag. When members start expressing this level of dissatisfaction, it's clear there's trouble ahead. The issue with Starmer's approach is that it's not just isolating individual MPs, it's creating divisions throughout the party. Long-time Labour members who once felt a deep connection to the party are now questioning their place within it. If things don't change soon, Labour risks losing its core supporters, the ones who have remained loyal even through tough times. And if this internal discontent continues to grow, Starmer could be facing a full-scale revolt. Keir Starmer just doesn't seem to have that spark with the public. Unlike past Labour leaders like Tony Blair, who had this natural charisma and could connect with people, Starmer comes off as cold and a bit too legalistic. He's more about rules and policies than the kind of relatable, warm approach that makes people feel like he's one of them. This has made it tough for him to build any real connection with voters, and it's showing in the numbers.
The criminal gangs are highly organised now. They have a ready supply of boats coming from China that go to Turkey and then are shipped to Germany for onward transferal to France, where they're assembled and sent across.
Labour's recent local election results were rough, to say the least. Starmer's leadership hasn't translated into the kind of wins the party needs to stay competitive. When you're losing seats in areas where Labour once dominated, it's a clear sign that something isn't working. These poor showings have left a lot of people doubting whether he has what it takes to lead Labour through a general election. For all the talk about change and rebuilding, the results just aren't there. The disconnect between Starmer and the voters is undeniable. People don't see him as someone who understands their struggles or who genuinely cares about what they're going through. His reserved style, which might work well in a courtroom, just doesn't cut it in the rough and tumble world of politics where you need to get out there and connect with people. Starmer might be smart, but he doesn't come across as particularly relatable, and that's a big problem. What's worrying is that Labour needs someone who can energise the base and bring in new supporters, especially with the Conservatives dealing with their issues. Instead, Starmer's approach feels like more of the same, leaving people uninspired. When voters don't feel like they know you, and when you're not giving them a reason to believe things will be different under your leadership, they're not going to show up at the polls.